So now we're going to use what we just learned with square roots to answer some higher level questions. So this one is saying, what is the sum of all integers between the square root of 8 and the square root of 30? So the first and biggest thing I see in this question is the word sum. So that means I'm going to have to be adding numbers. And I'm adding the integers. So this means I'm adding the whole numbers between the square root of 8 and the square root of 30. So to figure out what integers those are in between, the first step I should do is create a number line. So on your paper as well, go ahead and create a number line. Now I know the square root of 8. So first of all, in my positives, my square root of 8 is small. So I'm going to go ahead and start my number line at 1. I don't need any negatives. And then underneath, just like before, I'm going to put the square roots for each integer. So the square root of 1 is 1. The square root of 4 is 2. And this is what they equal. That's what I'm putting right underneath. And again, I'm getting these numbers, the square roots. That number underneath is the square of the integer. 2 times 2 is 4. 3 times 3 is 9. 4 times 4 is 16, and so on. So pause this at any time if you need to, if you're not done copying. So the square root of 8, I'm going to place on my number line, is going to be right before the square root of 9, which means it's right before my integer of 3. The square root of 30 is in between the square root of 25 and 36, so therefore it's in between the integers 5 and 6. So again, I'm looking for the sum of all of the integers between these. So now I'm looking at the actual numbers on the number line, the integers. So I need to go from right here, square root of 8, square root of 30. What are the integers in between? That's 3, 4, and 5. Those are my whole numbers in between these square roots. So all I need to do is 3 plus 4, which is 7. 7 plus 5 equals 12. So I put my perfect squares, my square roots underneath my integers, determine where the square roots are that I'm looking for, and then look at my numbers in between. So this question says, what is the sum? So again, I'm thinking I'm going to be adding of all the integers. So I'm going to be adding whole numbers between the square root of 33 and the square root of 90. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do again is create a number line. This is where when you start to know your perfect squares really well, it'll help you shorten your number line. So I don't need to start my number line all the way at 0. I know that 5 squared is 25 and 6 squared is 36. So my first number would be in between those. So I'm just going to start my number line off at 5. If you didn't know that though, you can start it off at 1 or 0. It's just a few extra numbers. So once I've got my integers, I'm going to put my perfect squares underneath. So 5 times 5 is 25, so square root of 25. 6 times 6 is 36. 49. And I stopped at 10 because I know that 10 times 10 is 100. And I see we're only going to 90. Okay, so now let's place, again, pause if you need to. Let's place our square roots. The square root of 33 is in between 25 and 36. It's a little closer to 36. So that means it's a little closer to 6. So that goes here. The square root of 90 is in between the square root of 81 and square root of 100, which means it's in between 9 and 10, pretty much right in the middle. And then again, I want the sum of the numbers in between. So I'm going from the square root of 33 to the square root of 90. I now have 4 numbers in between. So I have to do 6 plus 7 plus 8 plus 9, 13. And this is all calculator inactive work. 13 plus 8 is 21, and 21 plus 9 is 30. All right, so this question is different because I see the word difference. It says, what is the difference between, so automatically I'm thinking I'm subtracting this time. The closest integer value greater than the square root of 3 in the largest integer less than the square root of 29. So a lot of words, bigger, greater, less than. First thing, make our number line. I have a very small square root of 3, so I am going to start my number line at 1 this time. Okay, make sure you are putting this on your paper. Underneath, I'm going to put my perfect squares. 2 times 2 is 4. 3 times 3 is 9. Always pause for more time to copy if you need to. Okay, so square root of 3, let's place that, is in between square root of 1 and 4. A little closer to 4, so it's going to go right about here. And the square root of 29 is in between square root of 25 and square root of 26. A little closer to 5. Okay. So now this one isn't asking for numbers in between. So let's read carefully for what it wants to ask. The closest integer value greater than the square root of 3. Okay. Well, here's the square root of 3. It's in between the integers 1 and 2. Well, which one is greater than the square root of 3? 2. My integer 2 is just a little bit bigger than the square root of 3. Next, I want the largest integer less than the square root of 29. So I see where it is on my number line. It's in between 5 and 6. Well, which number is less than where this 29 is? It's my 5 right here. That's smaller. That's to the left. It's less than. So I have my numbers 2 and 5. I want to know the difference, so I just need to do 5 minus 2, and that gives us 3. Okay, and our last one. What is the difference? So again, I'm going to be subtracting between the largest integer value less than the square root of 8 and the closest integer greater than the square root of 45. So again, make my number line. Again, I see a small square root of 8, so I'm going to start my number line at 1. And then make sure you have your square roots underneath your integers as well. Okay, so I need to first place square root of 8. Square root of 8 is going to be right before the square root of 9, which is 3. And the square root of 45 is going to be close to the square root of 49. So it's going to be close to our integer of 7. Okay, going back to the problem to look at the numbers. I want the integer less than the square root of 8. So square root of 8 is in between 2 and 3. So the integer that's less than, the integer that's smaller, between those two numbers is 2. Then I'm looking for the closest integer greater than the square root of 45. The square root of 45 is in between 6 and 7. Which one is bigger? 7. And then I want the difference, so I need to do 7 minus 2, which gives us 5.